What the heck is this? This is a thing I wanted to get into for a while now. I feel strongly enough about it that I'm going to strongly recommend that you listen to me yammering on about it, because it's very confusing to a lot of people. But this is basically a spin-off from Dragon Quest, specifically a spin-off of Dragon Quest IV chapter about Torneko Tulum, which is actually the one that I most recently finished as of the time I'm speaking to you now. It essentially begins with a summary of that chapter, the most important things. Torneko living in his village in Bakanava. Well, that is the village. North of Endor. I still can't believe that they actually not only named it that, but the name stuck. It still is the name of the village, or the kingdom south of Bakanava to this day. It's one of the few things that stays consistent between the different translations. Anyway, for those not aware, Torneko had an entire chapter of Dragon Quest IV, which is, it's my favorite one of them all. He works at a humble weapon shop, and he doesn't feel satisfied with that. So he sets out on his own. He gets his own item shop in Endor, the big city. He brings his wife and son with him. He impresses royalty. The king is pretty happy with what he does. You can see here, he's meeting with the king and the princess. He even brokered peace between the two neighboring kingdoms. The current name, the most recent translation, is Ballymoral. The corrupt king and his grab for power. So he actually got the prince and princess of those two kingdoms to finally express their secret love for one another. And yeah, a lot of Dragon Quest IV, that wedding is happening, I guess, but it never really actually does, I think. So anyway, where it diverges from Dragon Quest, he hears tell of a mysterious dungeon with who knows how many riches within. And if that phrase sounds familiar to you, this is the very first game in an entire series. The co-creator of Dragon Quest, Koichi Nakamura, basically heard one of his friends telling him about this game called Rogue, and he said, well, we could make like a whole series like that. And to this day, you still have Mystery Dungeon, or literally Mysterious Dungeon. So, as it happens, Torneko's family is very supportive, and they set out once again to a new place, not Endor. There you can see they're leaving. Wife and son coming with him, and eventually they find what they're looking for, and that is the subject of our game. And it will pick up immediately there. But yes, this is a very significant landmark game, and it may look familiar to anyone who's ever seen a Mystery Dungeon. It's actually kind of impressive how modern, like, the design of Mystery Dungeon is pretty much totally contained within this original game. A lot of things that you might recognize and just assume as a more recent design enhancement. It really does all go back to this. And yeah, it's actually one of my favorite subgenres of game. And not a whole lot of people would agree with that, for a number of reasons. But I'm going to go with the idea that a lot of it is actually due to the fact that a lot of people don't really understand makes Mystery Dungeon different. They're trying to treat it like an RPG or even like an action game because you have this real-time, everybody moves at the same time and takes all their turns. And that can cause some confusion, a little bit of a dissonance with how the player thinks the game is working versus how it's actually working. And for no apparent fault of their own, they'll have a really hard time and decide, oh, this game is terrible, I hate it. And it really makes you think about things in a completely different way. As you can see in this opening demo, which I don't know if it's totally randomized, but there's quite a few of them. You can see a lot of things are happening. There's some enemies that are duplicating. You see pretty early on he found a monster house, which is actually a thing that still exists in modern Mystery Dungeon. You can see enemies that are gathering around. They're all even hurting each other. And you can see how Torneko had to like back up, get some space, maybe get some of the monsters to leave him alone, to get bored even. And sometimes use ranged attacks, sometimes use items. So he's leveling up in real time. You can see all this stuff he got. And if he hadn't actually backed out of this room, it would have had a very different ending. And even then, he really, really badly needed to think about his moves. And Ricky landed on a trap. There's a lot of little gotcha things. Wow. That's a lot of traps in a row. So it really depends on the player's ability to adapt, take things in stride, and, you know, it's a big flexibility thing. So this is called Torneko's Great Adventure. And that little stamp right there is Mysterious Dungeon. So to answer your question that you probably had the entire time that I wasn't even addressing anything to do with it, no, I'm not going to make you read in Japanese or essentially wait for me to maybe tell you what's being said, which is not a good idea, by the way. But as it happens, this game has a pretty much complete fan translation, and it's actually pretty high quality, especially for, you know, a relatively obscure game. So that's pretty cool. There are a few caveats, but we'll get into those. But yeah, let's get started. Let's mystery some dungeons. If I can press the buttons. Oops. So you get save files. So basically we pick up where the intro left off before we had the demo take over. And I could explain my grand thesis for this whole project. You can see we're no longer in quasi 8-bit, whatever you want to call it, for the recap. Which I found interesting. Basically, you can pick this up right after Torneko's chapter. So, literally the rest of Dragon Quest IV does not matter, which is cool. It's like a wherever you want it to be kind of side story, which I'm a big fan of. I will note that the translation of the time, they basically used a direct translation of side characters, like Torneko's wife is called Nene. Her modern name is Tessie. And the son's name is Tipper now, but in this game, I think his name is Popolo. But they've found a place to rest and build their new life. I have to wonder what's going on with the item shop in Endor, but that is not what we're worried about. This is Enterprise, and capitalism moves on. We're in a place. Guess we don't know what it's called. I mean, it's kind of presumptuous to say it doesn't have a name. But we are in the middle of nowhere with a tree. So we're gonna let the kid name it. As with many things translated, or if you take a game directly from Japanese without doing any weird coding alterations, you know, like a full commercial product would, you'll often find that you don't get very many spaces for naming things. It's because in hiragana and katakana, you basically get double the consonants and vowels in a cluster. So that would actually be a really long name, or a reasonable length, for anything to be called in Japanese, even though it's not very long for our purposes. It's okay. I'm actually kind of used to having short names for some reason. Oh no. So they're naming the village Joe. So we are the Queen Village. Kind of weird that we're calling it a village. I thought we were just making a home for ourselves. But that's okay. Oh, another thing to point out. The complex history of localization of Dragon Quest. The character known as Torneko was originally called Talon in Dragon Quest IV for the NES. And basically that's one version of the localization. It was sort of a interesting time for the series. Everything would be like renamed to be more fantastic and westernized instead of names that Japan thought were westernized but were really kind of still tasted Japanese in their flavoring. So like Torneko is a very weird name in Japan, but to our ears in the West, we kind of hear it's like, ah, it sounds kind of Japanese because it's got Neko in it. It's got certain sound combinations that are weird in Japan, but still seem distinctly Japanese to an outsider's perspective. So basically, for the earliest years of Dragon Quest, every name got changed. You had the hero Roto became Erdrick, and stuff like that. And then, as a result, that was just the way it was done for, you know, the opening foray into putting Dragon Quest out there into the West. And then later, there would be like a more direct translation route, mostly in the Game Boy Color era when they were making a big push for more Dragon Quest. Actually, sorry, it was called Dragon Warrior up until that point, inclusive actually, because the phrase Dragon Quest had been copyrighted by, I believe, Wizards of the Coast as a sort of Dungeons and Dragons thing. But they never actually did anything with it. So, it was called Dragon Warrior until Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2, actually, was the first time it was allowed to be called Dragon Quest. But anyway, I severely digress. So at the time this was translated, we were going with the older names, the completely different. So every time they would say Torneko in the Japanese scripts, this translation goes with Talon. And then a lot of the monsters and items that are recurring elements will have their, like, canonized names of the time, some of which are very different from modern. But anyway, that's just why we're calling him Talon, but he's Torneko. And in the present day, they've actually reconciled these two translations, and you have a character who his given name is Torneko and his last name is Tulun. So he'll be called Torneko Tulun these days. This also happened with Chapter 1 of Dragon Quest IV. In Japanese, the main character of that one was called Ryan. Which, you know, fair enough, that's a westernized name. But it didn't sound very fantastic to the Western audiences, so they named him Ragnar, which is like a Norse reference. But nowadays, instead of calling him Ryan or Ragnar, he's Ragnar McRyan, the soldier of Bonnie Old Burland. So it's really a lot of interesting history and flavor. And I have wasted enough of your time on that. I apologize to anybody watching the non-commentated version, but they can't hear my apology. Suckers. So anyway, we'll see the king. They'll set up shop, I guess, around this tree in the middle of nowhere. She's such a great wife. She's super supportive of her bumbling, adventuring, wanderlust husband. And, actually it works out for everyone. So yeah, is it really okay for us to name, like, a village that's only a tree and a clearing around a place that has a king? I don't know. It was pretty difficult to get the king of Endor to give us a shop within his town. Can't imagine this king being super happy about us naming an entire village that does not exist yet. Or maybe it did. That's very confusing. Anyway, let's pay our respects. I see, the mysterious dungeon is a real thing, a known quantity to these villagers. I see. It is very mysterious. No, that's what we're here for. Have you heard about his exploits as a chapter-chosen individual of a grander RPG? Oh, I'm glad there are legends about him in multiple places about multiple things. So yeah, the thing about Mystery Dungeon that most people probably struggle with immediately is the goal is not to win. It is to basically get a bunch of stuff and not die. Because the whole prospect is set against you. You are not you're not going to do a lot of the standard JRPG stuff. You're not going to grind levels, and you're not going to, like, amass a bottomless sack of wealth. And, most importantly, you are not going to be able to do this forever. There are several things acting against you. And, if you try to play this like a JRPG, you will have problems. So we'll get a little glimpse into that, I think, because eventually the king stops talking and we're gonna get to play the game. Oh yeah, there's a tutorial dungeon. That's the most important thing, actually. I find that most mystery dungeons don't really teach you much about playing Mystery Dungeon, which is probably a big factor in how difficult it is for people to adapt to it. It's like throwing you into the deep end and saying, alright, well, if you get it, you get it, and if you don't, well, maybe it wasn't for you. Which is kind of a problem when people are trying to get invested in a game like this. So a lot of people probably just don't. Which is a shame, I think, but also, like, the game is kind of not doing its best job justifying its existence. So, it seems that there is a fetch quest. Ah, you really shouldn't trip over slimes. They're so cute. It's not a, what did he ever do to you? Oh yeah, this one is a little bit different than most mystery dungeons, I find, so it is literally the first one, so I think it's just a thing that they eventually decided was not as good an idea as it seemed like. I think it's really interesting anyway. Oh yeah, talk to the people. Now, literally, I have not met any of them. Oh, they probably want me. He's trying to warn me that they might have different things to say, which is unusual for this kind of game. So we got medical herb. Yeah, the thing about Mystery Dungeon is hunger, which is one of those limiting factors that will prevent you from just sort of staying there forever. Among many other quickly mounting elements against you. But we'll have plenty of chance to see those. Yep. Oh yeah, and there are scrolls. There's actually a whole lot of things going on, and the game will basically describe none of them. There's a lot of trial and error and learning about things that most people would not expect, even from JRPGs and such. Usually it's like, oh, this is a weapon, I equip it, I hit things harder, stuff like that. Okay, so he's not saying anything extra. See, now he's got me all kinds of paranoid about this sort of thing. Yes, herbs are interesting. The minister kind of told us about that. But there are actually many kinds. So you can see there are going to be many classes of items. And also, they can be useful either for you or for enemies. So it's going to take a lot of experimentation and see if he has anything else. Nope. It's going to take a lot of... It's a very lateral thinking type game. It's not just like, okay, attack enemy A until it dies, and then start attacking enemy B. You can also see there's +1, so you can basically upgrade your equipments, which is kind of important and interesting for this kind of thing. And yeah, staff items will have uses. Those names might sound weird, but basically upper is the name for the defense boosting spell of the time, and by kill is the attack raising one instead of their current names. Which, off the top of my head, I would recognize them, but I would not say them correctly right now. But it's just to remember that upper is for defense and by kill is for attack. Yep, you gotta equip stuff. And yeah, your facing actually matters, which is like a strategy game. There's a lot to worry about. Oh yeah, it's important to note that I guess you always have a bow, just to make it so that items like arrows are always useful. It's more like a commodity and resource to use the way you need to. Okay, this guy has nothing else to say. If it seems like this is a lot of information to dump on you up front, it is. And that's also a thing that probably most people don't have the patience for. Stop moving. Which, to a certain degree, it can't be helped, but there's also like there's an art to the learning curve and dropping it on you slowly, which a lot more modern mystery dungeons are a little bit more measured about, which is important. Yeah, this guy has a good point. You're not a fighter, technically, even though Torneko is actually pretty good at everything but magic, and that means he can do a lot of things, but he's not going to excel in any of them to the degree that, like, well, a professional fighter like Ragnar could just sort of blow through this game like it was nothing. Yeah, with a few healing herbs, because he doesn't have his buddy Healy with him. But, it's really more a game of item management, which is important. If you just try to fight stuff, you'll get some early successes, but it's really not gonna keep you alive and safe for the whole time. Yeah, you really should stop running in circles. Okay, so really actually, maybe I missed all their words the first time. He wanted to tell me that now they have new things to say. Well, that's a bummer. We missed out on some flavor text. Maybe I'll create like an addendum video that features some of that. Oh yeah, there's diagonal movements. Since it's on like a grid, like an RPG would be, it kind of throws people off that diagonals are also one space. The enemies will be very keen to show you that diagonals are the fastest way to travel in two directions, so they will get you. So you kind of have to internalize that. You can also change your facing. I wonder if they'll actually let me do this before. No, I can't do either of those things. I can't even move diagonally in this area. It's not a very safe way to teach people that. Oh yeah, you can also wait in place to heal yourself, and we'll see that. A lot of these control conventions persist even to this day if you played a more modern mystery dungeon. That's interesting. Yeah, so we don't get any more flavor text out of these people. Thank goodness for you who are tired of this.